So this is a good slide to have. Take a screenshot, take a picture, or you could just quickly write it down. There's not much to write down here. But 3 A's, active transport, ATP, which is, of course, cellular energy, and against the gradient. And that just means from low to high concentration. Typically, things want to roll from high to low. So going from low to high requires going against the gradient. It requires energy. So I'm leaving this up for about 10 seconds. This gives me an opportunity to take my attendance. Breon, Pedro, Rudy, and Chandler. What's up, Chandler? Michaela, Ayana, Jason, Alex, and Brianna. Sade, Monet, and Abraham. Okay. All right, so this is an open-ended question that you all will be able to answer in this Nearpod. The question is, Antonio placed a saltwater plant in a container of distilled water. What will happen to the plant cells over time? What's going to happen to those plant cells over time? You've got 60 seconds to answer this question. I'd love to see 100% participation. Remember, the incentive is that if you participate for this whole activity, I am giving 10 points extra credit towards your Unit 9 exam that we took on Monday. All right, so make sure that you are answering this question. Antonio placed a saltwater plant in a container of distilled water. What will happen to the plant cells over time? Okay, we must have a lot of people thinking. We're about halfway through, 30 seconds left. Let's get some answers. Fifteen seconds left. Good, good, good. All right, so not many of you submitted, but I do appreciate those. Oh, actually, here come the answers now. Good. So Sade and Rudy, you guys are correct. Your answers are right on the money. So I'm sharing Rudy's answer now. He says the cell would absorb the water and explode. So that is correct. Let's take a look at why that's correct. And Sade said essentially the same thing. So same question. We place a saltwater plant into a container of distilled water. So what is that really telling us? We've got this cell, and I represented the cell with that kind of circular figure inside of the beaker. If it's a saltwater plant, then it's used to being in a condition or in a container that is very salty. It might be 50% salt, 50% water. That's an exaggeration, but this, for the purposes of this exercise, just to make it obvious, we'll think about it as 50-50. So it's a really salty environment. That's what the plant is used to. But if we place it into a container of distilled water, that distilled water is far more, it has a far greater concentration of H2O and a far lower concentration of NaCl, of salt. So this imbalance, this discrepancy between the beaker and the cell itself is going to lead to osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water. In this case, 98% is higher than 50%. That means that the water is going to flow from the beaker into the cell. Water is flowing from where it's in a higher concentration to where it is in a lower concentration. This will cause just like Rudy and Sade said, this can cause the cell to swell up, to get bigger. And if it goes on for too long without the cell being able to pump some of the water out, the cell will eventually burst and explode, okay? So the point here is to remember what osmosis means. Osmosis is the movement of water from areas in which it is in a high concentration, in this case, 98%, to areas where it is in a lower concentration. All right. The next letter of STERNGRR is nutrition. I don't think I really said too much about this, but keep in mind that I do want to get some examples. So what examples of the consumption of vital nutrients can we recall? What have we talked about in class so far? So we've got this Collaborate board. I'd love to see some answers on the Collaborate board. What are some examples of nutrition that we can think of? Are there any vocabulary words that are related to nutrition or any processes about how organisms get their food? Good vegetables, spinach and broccoli represents a good healthy meal for human beings. Protein, good. Thank you, Sade. Glucose. Sade, I love this word, photosynthesis. That's, of course, how autotrophs make their own food. Breon, thank you for that. Carbohydrates, yeah. So we've got some of these organic compounds, carbs and proteins. Glucose is the monomer of carbs. We then use the food that we make to do respiration. Thank you, Sade. That's a good answer. All right, let's keep going. So again, if you wanted to write down the definition of nutrition, there it is on your screen again. It's the consumption of vital nutrients. So we kind of think about the fact that we do need a balanced diet, and not just human beings, but all organisms. They need to get some of their nutrients from various sources. So while plants and other autotrophs make their own glucose, they still need to get nutrients from the soil as well. They still need a source of nitrogen to make proteins and to make nucleic acids. They still need other minerals and vitamins to be healthy. Our bodies and the bodies of many organisms are really good at repurposing things. So even though we might take something in a certain form, our bodies are good at breaking them down and repurposing them to make new things. But we still have to make sure that we are consuming these vital nutrients. I'm going to move on in 5 seconds. Okay. The G in STERNGRR stands for growth and development. This is when organisms increase in size and form. So what are some examples of organisms increasing in size and form that you can recall from class? What are some examples we can think of? Okay, evolution definitely is a big concept. We spent one of our longest units talking about evolution, and that's how organisms become more complicated over time, and how we have a shared ancestor, a simple form of life, But over time, we've obviously developed to have a wide variety, a wide diversity of life. Thank you for that, Ayana. Snakes and frogs, okay. Mutations definitely increase the diversity of life, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in harmless ways, and sometimes in bad ways. Interesting point there, Brian. Climate change. We're going to move on just so we can keep going. So one of the most important concepts to remember here, and there's the definition of growth and development at the top. One of the most important concepts is this idea of gene regulation. So gene regulation is what allows cells to specialize. So every cell in your body has the same DNA, and every cell in any organism's body has the same DNA as all the other cells, but they are able to produce different proteins. And producing different proteins allows them to develop different abilities. This is possible through this process of gene regulation, in which certain genes are turned on and other genes are turned off, they're deactivated. So if we look in this image, we've got two genes, number 1 and number 4, which are deactivated. And so no protein is being produced. Remember, a gene is just a section of DNA that codes for a specific protein. So if we don't activate a gene, if we don't turn it on, then no protein is going to be made. When we do turn the gene on, as is the case with gene 2 and gene 3, the cell is triggered to make the proteins that those genes code for. All right. This is what allows for cells to develop different abilities and different functions. So cells, they start off as undifferentiated, and that just means that they don't have a specific job yet. We call those stem cells. But as their genes are regulated, they become specialized, and they might become a muscle cell or a fat cell or a blood cell or an epithelial cell, which makes up your skin and the lining of some of your organs, or an immune cell. So they develop these diverse functions once their genes are activated, once they produce specific types of proteins. All right. So now we want to think about another hugely important concept. This is going to take 3 minutes. I want you all to match the stages of the cell cycle with their correct descriptions. Match the stages of the cell cycle with their correct descriptions. 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes. I think we've got 8 pairs. Good job, Pedro. Okay, we are just about halfway done. So 90 seconds left, 90 seconds. Sade, where are you? Excellent job, Rudy. 8 out of 8 in 9 tries. Will anybody beat that? Let's see. I don't think so. Good job to you, Alex. 8 out of 8. Ayana, excellent. 8 out of 8 in 11 tries. Good. Okay, we've got just about 30 seconds left. Let's see how many of us can get there with all 8 pairs. If you're struggling, this might be an opportunity to write this down. Maybe just write a reminder in your notes, like, hey, I need to come back to the cell cycle. This is something that I have forgotten about. We will continue to talk about it. Good job, Pedro. 10 tries. Good job, Brian and Jason. All right. So again, if this is something that you struggle with, make a note. This is something that you need to come back to do or to cover again, the cell cycle. So we had those 8 pairs. G1, the cell begins to grow at the beginning of interphase. After that, the cell goes to synthesis, in which it makes, remember, synthesis is to make something. So the cell is making a copy, in this case, of its DNA. Before it can divide, the cell has to replicate its DNA. Then it goes to G2. And again, G, we can think of the G's as standing for growth. The cell continues to grow, but this time, this is the end of interphase. At this point, it begins the M phase portion of the cell cycle, which is mitosis. So the first part of mitosis is prophase. The nuclear membrane dissolves, the chromatin condenses, spindle fibers form and move into place. All right, so let's take a look at this. I want to keep going. So this might be a good slide to take a picture of or a screenshot. The cell cycle is the means by which organisms grow and develop by producing new cells. Let's see, I think we've got one more quiz. Well, if I have to. So this is I'll come back to these slides tomorrow. Let's see, let's do this quiz. Let's take 2 minutes to knock this out. I know this is going to take us a little bit over our class time, but 2 minutes to knock this quiz out. This is about the cell cycle and mitosis. Minute and a half, 90 seconds left, 90 seconds. $45 seconds left, 45. $15. Let's see, let's make sure we get done. Several of us have already left, so we might take this quiz again tomorrow, but I appreciate those of us who have given it our all. All right, good. So good job, Pedro. Looks like you didn't get to that 4th question. Rudy did 3 out of 4, and Jason did 3 out of 4. So it looks like that 4th question was difficult for us. We will take this again tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and end this session, but again, those of you who are participating 100% of the way, you will be rewarded. So I appreciate it. And everyone else, I appreciate you as well. But I want you to come back tomorrow ready to pick up where we are leaving off. So good job, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.